We were on chapter 19, and we had gotten as far as verse 17. Okay, so where we're the return of David, we're in the process of David's return to Jerusalem after Absalom has been killed and his rebellion has been defeated. So now he's coming back, okay? Verse 17. Shimei, the son of Gera, the Benjaminite from Bahurim, hurried down with Judites, in other words, met people from Judah, to meet King David, accompanied by 1,000 Benjamites. Okay, now we'll recall that on the way down to the Jordan, when David is fleeing from Jerusalem and he's traveling east towards the Jordan, and he's going to cross the Jordan, end up on the other side, when he's fleeing from Absalom, there are two people initially that he encounters. If we want to just go back and take a look at that quickly, if you look at chapter 16, verse 1, okay, we see here David had passed a little beyond the summit when Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, came toward him with a pair of saddle asses. So it's Ziba who, and we're going to dwell into who Ziba is and what goes on here. But just to remember, he's greeted by Ziba, who's the servant of Mephibosheth. He's without Mephibosheth, and he brings to David food, okay, as a sign of support for David. And when David asks him what happened to Mephibosheth, he lies and he tells him he's staying in Jerusalem because he's waiting for Absalom. And what does he say? He says in verse 3, Ziba replied to the king, for he thinks that the house of Israel will now give him back the throne of his grandfather. So Ziba comes out as somebody who was connected with the house of Benjamin, and specifically with the house of Saul. And he expresses support for David, but he lies as if Mephibosheth sees Absalom's rebellion as an opportunity for the house of Saul to rise up again. The next person that that David meets on the way down, is Shimei, son of Gera. And here, Shimei throws stones at him, he curses him, and he says specifically, the Lord, and this is verse 8, the Lord is paying you back for all your crimes against the family of Saul, whose throne you seized. Again, we have two people connected with Benjamin, and Ziba, through a lie about Mephibosheth. Shimei, through his own words, are seeing or comparing this situation or seeing it as a just desert, shall we say, to David for seizing the throne from Benjamin. So we have this encounter with Benjamin in a very problematic way, and referring back to Saul. Now David is on the way back up, and it's really a physical. It's really very interesting, because if you are aware of the geography, as you leave Jerusalem to go down to the Jordan Valley and across the Jordan, you're literally going down. You're going from about 800 meters above sea level to about 300 or 400 meters below sea level. Okay, so that's of course his descent from the throne. When David comes back to Jerusalem, again, he's literally going to be climbing up that same way, which is a very interesting geographical way of expressing his rising up again to take his place, his rightful place on the throne. So here we have, first, we meet Ziba again. Here we meet Shimei ben Gera again, this time on the way up. And what happens? First of all, he comes with 1,000 people with him from Benjamin, and he comes with Ziba, okay? And so those same two characters and the connection with Benjamin are meeting him as they come out. So what happens now? Verse 19, while crossing... we'll continue reading 18, accompanied by 1,000 Benjamites, and Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, together with his 15 sons and 20 slaves, rushed down to the Jordan ahead of the king. And we mentioned these people when we first met Ziba. we mentioned that he has all these sons and all these slaves. I'll just keep that in mind. We'll get back to that again. While the crossing, verse 19, while the crossing was being made to escort the king's family over and do whatever he wished, Shimei, son of Gera, flung himself before the king as he was about to cross the Jordan. He said to the king, "Let not my lord hold me guilty, and do not remember the wrong your servant committed on the day my lord the king left Jerusalem. Let your majesty give it no thought. For your servant knows that he has sinned. So here I have come down today, the first of all the house of Joseph." Joseph, remember, Benjamin is Joseph's brother, but it's like the two of them are the children of Rachel. And so he's coming in that association between him and Joseph to meet my lord the king. Okay, so here we have a situation. Seba hasn't said anything yet, but he's together with them. This whole Benjamite crew, 1,000 people, and Shimei is prostrating himself before David and asking for forgiveness. "I'm terribly sorry. I didn't mean it." Okay. Thereupon, Avishai, son of Tzruya, spoke up. Now, that's his nephew. Now, remember, Yoav is also the son of Tzruya. Tzruya is David's sister, and we've met a couple of the sons, and the most relevant right now, Yoav, who's still David's chief of staff of the army or whatever, and his closest advisor. Avishai is Yoav's brother, okay? So Avishai here says, thereupon Avishai, son of Tzruya, spoke up, "Shouldn't Shimei be put to death for that, insulting the Lord's anointed?" He's basically saying, okay, when you went down, he cursed you. You were in no position to punish him at that point because you had just been deposed effectively as king, and you're running for your life. But now you're back being king. So he's saying to David, "Don't you think ye should be putting him to death for the sin of cursing the king?" And he refers here to the king as the anointed of God. And you may recall that during that whole period of time where Saul was chasing David, there were a couple of opportunities that David had to kill Saul. And his people said to him, kill Saul, you have an opportunity. And David said, no, because Saul is an appointed or an anointed. He's an anointed of God. And here we have the same idea where, in this case, Abishai is defending David and says, someone who tries to harm you should have a special punishment. You're not just the king, but you're anointed of God. But David said, "What has this to do with you, you sons of Tzruya, that you should cross me today?" Okay, now, the word cross that I have here, I don't know if you have a different translation, but that you should cross me today, the literal Hebrew here is that you should serve as a Satan to me today. Okay, so it's not just cross, but that you are putting yourself literally in the position of a devil. You are presenting a point of view that is bad. Okay, so it's a much stronger word than "you should cross me today." So you know how it is. Sometimes the English translation may have the right idea, but by using a word and not another word, I think you lose some of the power in the original Hebrew. So this is one of those examples. "Should a single Israelite be put to death today? Don't I know that today I am again king over Israel?" Then the king said to Shimei, "You shall not die," and the king gave him his oath. Okay, so what he is saying, what David is saying, is that this is an important day. This is a day that I am going to again take my position as king of Israel. Do we really want that day to begin with me killing somebody? Okay, now, this reminded me very, very strongly of, if you'll recall, Abigail's words to David. Now, let's go, if you want to see where that is, that's in 1 Samuel chapter 25. And just to remind you of the context, Nabal, who is Abigail's husband, Nabal, is a nasty fellow, and he has wronged David. And David, he's during this period of time where he's running away from Saul, and he's got his band of 600 men, and Nabal has wronged David, and David's temper is really flared, and he's on his way. He's going to take his 600 men, and he's going to go and he's going to kill Nabal, his entire family, and all his men. Okay, and Abigail, understanding that this is a very, very hot situation, she steps in order to diffuse the situation. And this is what she brings gifts to David. She calms him down. She admits that she agrees that Nabal was wrong, but then she says something very interesting. So if you look at 1 Samuel chapter 25, verse 30, and when the Lord has accomplished when the Lord, meaning God, has accomplished for my Lord, meaning David, okay? So when the Lord has accomplished for my Lord David all the good he has promised you and has appointed you ruler of Israel, do not let this be a cause of stumbling and of faltering courage to my Lord, that you have shed blood needlessly, and that my Lord sought redress with his own hands. So you have a very similar thing where she says to David, you are about to become king, which is very interesting. How does she know it? And there are those who say she was a prophetess. She was given word, because at this time, it is not yet public knowledge that David has actually become king, or will become king, that he was anointed of God. But it is also possible that she heard it via the rumor mill, because some people do know. But anyway, she says to him, you know that God has promised you, you're going to be king. Do you want this as a stain? You're going to become king with this stain on you before you even had the chance to become king, that you killed all these people, okay? Even though they're horrible people, they may deserve to die, but do you want this as a stain on your record? And so I find that when David is saying this now to Abishai, he is using the same logic that Abigail used with him. Yes, Shimei may deserve to be killed. He indeed cursed and threw stones at the king, and that's very bad, and it's a punishable offense, but I'm going to become king today. Do I really want to come into this special day and re-establish myself as a king with this kind of blemish on my record, that I chose this day and this opportunity to kill this guy? Wouldn't it be better if I forgave him? And that's exactly what he does. And I think what you're seeing here also is a sense of wisdom in David, that he realizes he has now fought, he has fought a terrible battle. He has been embroiled in a rebellion that his own son initiated, that created civil war in Israel, okay? And now he's won. So the question is, how do we then return to office? Do we punish those who rebelled against us? Or do we realize this is a terrible civil war that should never have happened? And if we want a truly strong nation, we have to bind up the wounds. We have to find unity of the people again. The person who was really responsible for all of this mess, Absalom, he's already dead. We don't have to deal with that anymore. Okay, all the rest of the people who followed Absalom wrongly, but whatever it was, he exerted influence on them. They were swept. They did the wrong thing, whatever. What good will it do to all of us, any of us in the nation, if we continue to fight that fight? And I think this is very much what David's approach is right now. He just does not want to start new fights. He doesn't want to dwell on the old fights, but he wants to bring things together. And we're going to see that as we continue, and we'll also question whether it's always the right thing to do. Next, Mephibosheth, the grandson of Saul, also came down to meet the king. He had not pared his toenails or trimmed his mustache or washed his clothes from the day that the king left until the day he returned safe. When he came from Jerusalem to meet the king asked him, "Why didn't you come with me, Mephibosheth?" He replied, "My lord the king, my own servant deceived me." Now, we know already that Siva deceived David, saying that Mephibosheth stayed back because he was joining Absalom. But it's not only that he deceived David, he also deceived Mephibosheth. He said, and I continue in verse 27, your servant planned to saddle his ass and ride on it and go with your majesty, for your servant is lame. Ziba has slandered your servant to my lord the king. But my lord the king is like an angel of the Lord. Do you see fit? Basically, what he's saying is that his servant Ziba was supposed to help him leave. He's lame. He can't do this by himself. His servant was supposed to saddle his donkey and help him leave, and he deceived him and didn't do that. And then on top of that, deceives David, saying that Mephibosheth is really a traitor when he's not. So this Ziba is quite a piece of work. Okay, he takes opportunity here to ingratiate himself with David at the expense of Mephibosheth. Okay, and what really happens here, it kind of plays into the hand of David's experience as he leaves Jerusalem. He's encountering in his mind two Benjamites, okay, who are reliving or reestablishing the ancient problem with the house of Saul. Absalom's rebellion had nothing to do with the house of Saul. But Shimi ben Gera sees this as an opportunity. He actually has a more personal heart. I think he's from the Saul family and thinking, oh, gee, we should have been king and we're not. But Ziba, he has nothing personal. He's a servant to the house of Saul. And then he was given protection by David. He could have gone either way, but he's seeing this, as this opportunity to ingratiate himself with David at the expense of Mephibosheth. And at this point, Mephibosheth is there to set the record straight. Okay. But what does he say? But my lord the king is like an angel of the Lord. Do as you see fit. He has such humility that he says to David, however you want to treat me, if you want to believe in Ziba, believe him, but I'm telling you, I was with you. For all the members of my father's family deserved only death from my lord the king, yet you set your servant among those who ate at your table. What right have I to appeal further to your majesty? In contrast to the way Shimei behaved before and the way Ziba has presented him as if all this time they bear a grudge against David for how Saul is treated. On the contrary, Mephibosheth puts it right. It's not Saul who was harmed by David. It is David who was harmed by Saul. And David had every right after he became king, especially as a result of how he was treated by Saul. He had a right to destroy the entire family of Saul, which, by the way, is the way ancient kings did it. A new king came in. He wanted to make sure he wasn't going to have any rivals from the previous king family. And so he'd kill everybody, all the descendants of that king. And so this is basically what Mephibosheth said. You had a right to do that. And you didn't. You spared us. And therefore, what right do I have to have any complaints, any further problems? The king said to him, verse 30, you need not speak further. I decree that you and Ziba shall divide the property. Whoa. This is a real problem. Because what happened was, Ziba came initially and said, Mephibosheth has rebelled against the kingdom. And David said, okay, it's all yours. In other words, when you have somebody who is a rebel against the king, the punishment is that all of his property becomes the property of the king. Okay? And that's, and we discussed this in other contexts in the past, but it ensures that, if let's say somebody wants to rebel against the king, and if he's taking into account, well, worst comes to worst, they kill me, but my children will still have my property and they'll still have my status and it's okay. When the punishment becomes, no, all your property will come to the king, if you do something like that, your children will also suffer. It becomes a much greater deterrence, okay, against this kind of behavior. And so basically that was what David had said before to Ziba. And now instead of saying, oh, Mephibosheth, I am so sorry. I wronged you and I listened to Ziba. Ziba doesn't deserve anything. If anything, let's put Ziba in jail, okay, or whatever. Instead, David says, basically, I don't want to get involved. You say one thing, Mephibosheth, you say another, Ziba, divide the property. Divide it. And you know what? To me, it also reminds me of something. What does it remind you of anything? Another biblical story later on?
Solomon
Mm-hmm.
cut the baby in two.
Exactly. Cut the baby in two. But Solomon uses this when he really and truly has two people before him and he really doesn't know which one to believe, but he uses this as a way to get to the truth. He has no interest in dividing a baby in half, but he knows the mother, who is the real mother, would surrender the baby to keep the baby alive. And that's how I know who the real mother is. But here it's almost like, what is this? Yes, you can divide the property in two. There's no problem there, okay? But it's in a way, it's like a mocking of the true justice. Get to the bottom of this. Don't just say divide it in two, because, assuming, even if he's not sure who to believe, so figure it out, check it out, have a court or whatever. Now, it's very possible that the reason he does this is coming from the same motivation that enables him to forgive Shimei. I do not want more discord in my kingdom when I come back to rule. What I think was very legitimate and was the wise thing to do in the case of Shimei, because in the case of Shimei, no one is hurt and no one has lied. Shimei really and truly cursed the king. Shimei really and truly repented. Now, it doesn't matter if Shimei repented because he realized he was on the losing side and he wants to make sure that he gets in good with the king so the king doesn't punish him. Okay, it could be, it doesn't matter. But the truth of the matter is no one's hurt, and he truly does whatever his reason for repenting, he truly repents in the sense that he's not going to rebel against the king. On the other hand, in this situation, Ziba has lied and not only is not punished for his lie, but is rewarded for the lie by walking away with half the property. And indeed, there's criticism amongst the in Jewish tradition, in the Talmud and other places, there's real criticism against David for taking this approach with Ziba. And there's one source that basically says you divided the property between Ziba and Mephibosheth, your descendants will end up dividing the kingdom, foretelling the division of the kingdom from Judah and Israel that will happen after Solomon's death. So I thought that's interesting, and I think there's actually a certain level of hinting towards a Judah-Israel division that we will see afterwards, but we haven't gotten to that yet, and I don't think we're going to get to it today. But anyway, okay, now what I want to do is, I want to go further in this next bit of the story and then sum it up, okay? So, we're on verse 32. Oh, no, verse 31. Mephibosheth, this amazing, humble person who has no desires to ask more for himself. How does he respond to Ziba? He doesn't say, but that's not fair, okay? He says, and Mephibosheth said to the king, let him take it all, as long as my lord the king has come home safe. Okay, such a noble man, okay? 32. Barzillai the Gileadite came down from Roglin and passed on to the Jordan with the king to see him off at the Jordan. Now, Barzillai is somebody we've also met before, okay? So the last time we met him, he was in chapter 17. He was one of the people who meets David to help him out, truly helping him out, not like Ziba with a story, but truly. And this is in chapter 17, verse 27. Let's see. When David reached Machanaim, Shovi, son of Nachash from Rabat Ammon, Machir, son of Amiel from Lodabar, And Barzillai, this is the guy, the Gileadite from Rogelim, presents couches, basins, and earthenware, also wheat, barley, flour, parched grain, beans, blah, 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 blah. For they knew that the troops must have grown hungry, faint, and thirsty in the wilderness. So when he crosses the Jordan and he gets to Machanaim, they come forward and they give him this whole assistance that he really does need. So now he goes back, this Barzillai, and he's from Giladi. He's from the family of Gilad, which is part of the tribe of Manasseh. And if you recall, it is Manasseh that is the tribe on the other side of the Jordan. And it's interesting that he ends up being from Manasseh, which if you'll recall is one of the children of Joseph. And if you go back at 21, verse 21, when Shimei speaks, he refers to the first of all the house of Joseph to meet my Lord the King. And in a way that kind of connects the people that are meeting David, all these Benjamites, and then you have Barzillai from Manasseh, also of the house of Joseph, also from the children of Rachel, coming together to meet David. I think there's something symbolic about that as well. But anyway, so he comes back. In other words, he walked up and came down, and now he's going back to Jordan. He joins him to help them cross the Jordan. And it's quite a job to cross the Jordan. We have a lot of people, etc. So he comes to help them. Barzillai was very old, 80 years of age, and he had provided the king with food during his stay in Machanaim, for he was a very wealthy man. Now, we knew that already, but here we're being reminded of it, okay? The king said to Barzillai, cross over with me, and I will provide for you in Jerusalem at my side. He basically now offers Barzillai to be what he had always offered Mephibosheth. I will come with me. When the case of Mephibosheth, he had done that because he was the only remaining son of Jonathan. Here he had such gratitude for his friendship with Jonathan. Here he's offering the same thing as gratitude for what this man, who we never knew before, has done for him and supported him in his difficult time. But Barzillai said to the king, how many years are left to me that I should go up with your majesty to Jerusalem? I am now 80 years old. Can I tell the difference between good and bad? Can your servant taste what he eats and drinks? Can I still listen to the singing of men and women? Why then should your servant continue to be a burden to my lord the king? Your servant could barely cross the Jordan with your majesty. Why should your majesty reward me so generously? Just a lovely, lovely man. But he's basically saying, I'm too old to move. I'm okay. Thank you very much. I'm okay. But then he continues, let your servant go back and let me die in my own town, near the graves of my father and mother. But here is your servant Kimham, okay, very weird name, Kimham, let him cross with my lord the king, and do for him as you see fit. And the king said, Kimham shall cross with me, and I will do for him as you see fit, and everything you want me to do, I will do for you. And the assumption here, Kimham is his son. Okay, so he's basically saying, I'm too old, but, because of what I did and helped you, perhaps transfer that favor to my son. And of course, then his son will become part of David's group. So that's where we're getting to now, because after that, verse 40 starts another story. But I just want to kind of review the going down and going up, where I talked about how Ziba and Shimei meet them going down, meet them coming up. And now we also see that Barzillai meets them going down and meets them coming up. And there's a parallel here. And when it comes to Shimei and Mephibosheth, and David decides he is not going to get involved. Both on the way down with Shimei, on the way down, he doesn't have a way to get involved, but on the way out, both with Shimei and with Ziba, Mephibosheth and Ziba, he doesn't get involved. He's stays neutral on this whole thing. But when it comes to Barzillai also came down and came him up. But in this case, it was such a clear-cut thing that he takes the opportunity of Barzillai coming back up with him to offer him this reward. And as I said, kind of supporting him very often, very much reminiscent of how he treated Mephibosheth, initially. And Mephibosheth still remains supported by David. That doesn't change. The only thing that changes how much of his property, the property that was sitting in Benjamin, okay, that Ziba was the steward of. That's the only thing that has changed. And Mephibosheth, is not so caring about money and whatever, and Ziba's taking advantage of that. And I just want to point out to you what I said when we saw in verse 18 that it mentions that Siba has 15 sons and 20 slaves. When we first met Siba, we learned the same thing about him, that he had 15 sons and 20 slaves. And we said at the time, and at that time was when David first, realized that Siba is taking advantage of Mephibosheth, and had Mephibosheth come to the palace and instructed Siba, you can't take advantage of your master and you cannot take his property. And what we noted at that time was that Siba had clearly gotten rich on Mephibosheth's property, because if he wasn't a wealthy man, he would not have had 15 sons. Probably had several wives, and he wouldn't have had 20 slaves. Here again, when we meet Siba again here, scripture reminds us, yes, this is the guy who has all along taken advantage of his master Mephibosheth with the 15 sons and the 20 slaves. And so there is something that still rings wrong about David saying split the property, because he still leaves him with half the property as his, not to take as a custodian for Mephibosheth, which is how it began. Okay. Now, basically, out of this whole story, Siba walks away with half of Mephibosheth's wealth. And that's sad. That is sad. Okay. That's it for today. Anyone have comments, questions, everything? Whatever you want to say.
I just wanted to say that I agree with you that David was trying to keep the peace when he forgave Jimmy and settled the dispute. Because as you and I know, as we know, that it was not really a forgiveness, because when he got to Shlomo, he told Shlomo how to deal with Jimmy.
Very good. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think it was just to keep the peace so he could govern,
Right. We talked a little bit about David's instructions to Solomon, and how he wants, I think we discussed it about Yoav, because he also says
Yoav, right?
Yoav. And what we did is we mentioned, was he angry at Yoav for killing Absalom? No, he was angry at him for killing Abner. And killing, okay. Now the rest of that we're going to see also. The three things that are in that instruction, there is mentions about the situation of Yoab and Abner. It mentions the situation of Yoab and Amasa, which we haven't yet encountered here, and the situation of Shimi ben Gera. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, Claudette. I meant to, and I forgot to, but that's the third thing. He says, kill him.
David really, I don't know that he forgives so much, like he is diplomatic about his actions. Like he is in a situation when he knows he used wisdom to say, okay, this is going to make the situation worse. Don't act on it.
And I think what happens in his instruction, the one problem of this with having to do with Shimei, is that the king said to Shimei, you shall not die. Okay. And the king gave him his oath. And so the question is, what does that mean? You won't die today, or I protected you. And he doesn't say you won't die forever, or he doesn't say, I'm going to protect you. He says, you shall not die, which I think the assumption is today, which enables him. Now, it could also be, you shall not die, I won't kill you. Okay, I won't be responsible for your death, which is why he doesn't do it later. He hands it over to Solomon. But that's also a whole question. Why does he do that? What happened? But I think one of the things that he's doing with Solomon is he's helping Solomon get rid of people that may end up being problematic.
So he can govern better without these people around.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's something that we'll just discuss when we get to the Book of Kings. We'll discuss.
It all ties in,
right. It's all ties in for sure. Thank you, Claudette. Anyone else? Okay. Well, it was a great seeing all of you today, and we'll meet again next week, and we will start with verse 40 of chapter 19. Okay.